friends of the channel. I'm Christian Barrientos Ichaso. I'm an international business lawyer and anti-corruption and compliance lawyer too. And today we are with the best investigative journalist, Martin Arostegui, correspondent for several of the most important international media, UPI, Voice of America, Wall Street Journal, the Daily Telegraph, the Washington Times, CNN, Fox News, and France 24. Today, we begin the year 2022 with the analysis of international security of the al-Qaeda network in Brazil, who better than our quest for honor in matter of international security against anti-corruption, against organized crime, and against terrorism.
Yeah, yes, good afternoon, Christian. Wonderful. Nice to be with you. Merry Christmas and all that. I think we're talking one of the new developments that I think you'd like to discuss with me is the issue by the U.S. Treasury Department of a communique alleging that there is an al-Qaeda cell operating in Brazil, which is basically at the moment the kind of activity that's traced to them is essentially one of support and fundraising and financing of al-Qaeda activities. It did not specify any particular attack. It didn't say they were particularly plotting any sort of violence, but it did say that they are a member in al-Qaeda in Brazil, Haytham Ahmad Shukri Ahmad al-Maghrabi, who's been operating in Brazil for some time, running a series of businesses, has been receiving money from funds from al-Qaeda connected individuals in the Middle East. And that they are seen to be moving this funding for unknown or so far unspecified purposes. This is nothing new, basically. I mean, the al-Qaeda type activities have been going on in Brazil and throughout South America for quite some time. There was, of course, the very intense fundraising activity in the tri-border region between Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina for terrorist organizations, not only al-Qaeda, but Hezbollah as well, which was pretty much broken up by the FBI. They intervened in Paraguay in a very major way back in the late 90s, and certainly intensified further their counter-terrorist investigations there following the 2001 attacks. But it's part of an ongoing presence and activity by al-Qaeda in Latin America. Al-Qaeda, and as well as other groups. Hezbollah has been very active in Latin America. In fact, unlike al-Qaeda, they actually pulled off a major attack in Buenos Aires, Argentina, quite some time ago. This was back in the 90s, in 1994 and 92, I believe, against both Israeli targets. One was the Israeli embassy, the other one was a Jewish community center alleged to be, and also to be a base for Israeli intelligence operations in South America. And there have been all kinds of ongoing investigations over this. In fact, an Argentine attorney who was conducting a very in-depth investigation as to possible official collusion with Hezbollah was assassinated, as you know. They say he would committed suicide, but I've investigated the case. I did quite a bit of work on it for the Daily Telegraph, and I can tell you I'm 100% convinced that it was an assassination. Before he could present the conclusions of his investigation to the Argentine Congress. And of course, since al-Qaeda was broken up in the tri-border region, since they have set up quite a presence in Venezuela.
That's true.
In fact, it's interesting that members of the Hezbollah cell that bombed the Jewish Community Center of Buenos Aires, the AMIA building in 1994.
94.
3 or 4 of in fact, most of them, the ones who actually conducted the bombing, ended up in Venezuela. They surfaced in Venezuela where they tried to take asylum. At the time, of course, Venezuela was still under a democratic government of Carlos Andrés Pérez. And but their case was taken up by a Venezuelan attorney, a very well-connected Venezuelan attorney, Tariq William Saab, who protected them quite well. I mean, he prevented their extradition, and it's assumed that he had something to do with their subsequent escape from Venezuela to an unknown destination. Some think it was Cuba. And since then, any traces of them has been lost. Now, Tariq William Saab became a very close advisor to President Chavez, and he took a series of key positions with Chavez. He was at one point director of his international, I believe it was the Committee of International Relations of his ruling party, of the Venezuelan Socialist Party, which, under the type of regime Chavez had, was almost equivalent to a kind of de facto parallel foreign minister. And since then, he has become Attorney General of Venezuela under Maduro. So here we have a man that, shall we say, introduced Hezbollah to Venezuela, has protected the organization, and is currently, I believe, the Attorney General of Venezuela. And it goes even deeper. I mean, it goes higher, as a matter of fact. The U.S. Treasury Department also designated, they named a very high-level official in the Venezuelan government. In fact, a key man of the Maduro regime. He was a close collaborator of Chavez as well. Tariq el-Aissani, who, as a member of Hezbollah, a fundraiser for Hezbollah, who has directed money from funds raised through narco trafficking into Hezbollah accounts in Lebanon. And this man, he's been interior minister under Maduro. He's been vice president, economy minister, in charge of the oil. I think at one time was in charge of the oil, if not the oil, a major part of the oil sector, or a major oil dealings. And here you have a man who's been designated by the U.S. government as an operative of Hezbollah. So in fact, when you're in America at the moment, Christian, it's an interesting situation. You're getting 2 major terrorist organizations, perhaps the most dangerous ones in the world, who are establishing an ongoing and very active presence, and very highly well-connected presence in the region, connected at an official level. What does this portend for the future? Well, what I look at directly, I mean, as simply the first thing that jumps to my mind, the first target that I see, is of course the United States itself. Under the current administration in Washington, because of their pursuit of a policy of no border with Mexico. They're a very lax immigration policy. The defenses or controls along the southern border between the United States and Mexico have been virtually dismantled. I mean, this is quite known. You had millions of illegal immigrants coming across, most of whom we don't know even who they are. Their border controls have been reduced to the minimum, although I believe now they're beginning to restore some of them. And that's an open invitation for terrorists to infiltrate the United States and possibly set up cells and set up operations and possible future attacks in the U.S., especially if they have the kind of backing that they could have from organizations which are now active throughout Latin America. In fact, recently, I think the Border Patrol, or no, the FBI and the Border Patrol, they alerted about they arrested several Yemenis, I think 2 or 3, I believe. There were 2 separate arrests. One was 2 Yemenis, and then there was another Yemeni arrested some days later. That had come across the border illegally and were believed or suspected of possibly coming with the intention of setting up some kind of terrorist operation. Yemen, of course, is a very important base for al-Qaeda. Several operations several al-Qaeda attacks have been planned from there, including one attempt to blow up a jetliner. So, this kind of thing seems to be going on.
You have more information about the Salvatrucha organization, criminal group of Salvador who connects with al-Qaeda? Some information about this?
I have no information to date, Christian. And frankly, to be quite honest with you, I may be wrong. I simply, perhaps information has evaded me, or it's out there and I simply haven't. But to be perfectly honest with you, I don't yet have any direct link between al-Qaeda and any criminal group in Latin America, any major drug organization or criminal gang. There was, I think, an attempt of a al-Qaeda connected group to enter into contact with the FARC in Colombia a very long time ago. Actually, about the time of the 2021 attacks. And I think some Afghans, I don't know if they were connected directly with al-Qaeda, but would assume they had some connection. I think tried to also set up a poppy growing operation in Colombia. So they could export maybe heroin into the US. There was probably there may have been some al-Qaeda connection there as well. So I'm sure this goes on. I don't have any direct information about al-Qaeda connection with either Salvatrucha or the M13 or any of the sort of the better known criminal gangs. Although some attempt was made to enter into contact with FARC. I think that it was intercepted by the Colombian Security Service.
Colombia.
What strikes me again, al-Qaeda operates very much in a very compartmentalized way, particularly as which they would in Latin America, because they'd be afraid of being penetrated, especially if they're planning some very major operation of the sort. But in fact, again, where al-Qaeda does seem, where there may have been an al-Qaeda connection, again, is with the Venezuelan, with maybe the Venezuelan intelligence services, with the Venezuelan government or the Cubans, perhaps. At the time of the 2001 attacks, of the Twin Tower attacks and the 9/11 attacks in the US, the FBI actually caught a Venezuelan Arab, or an Arab with a Venezuelan passport. Mohammed Ali Diab Fattah was his name. I remember because I wrote about this quite extensively. And who was questioned arrested, detained, and questioned over his relationship, possible relationship with the al-Qaeda cell, which crashed American Flight 77 against the Pentagon, with members of that cell who were staged out of New Jersey. He had been seen in their company. He had apparently taken flight lessons at the same school as them, and apparently spoke in a very, had been overheard speaking in very radical ways about blowing up Israeli airliners and that kind of thing. He subsequently tried to escape the U.S., as I recall, and after the 9/11 attacks, and I think he was picked up very close to the Canadian frontier up in Wisconsin or something like that. And much to my amazement, I mean, you'd expect that they might have kept this guy, maybe sent him to Guantanamo or something, but no, they instead, they deported him, they expelled him to Venezuela. And with the understanding, supposedly from the Venezuelan government, that they would question him and keep him under some kind of surveillance, which quickly was proved not to be the case. The Venezuelan government claimed that he did not re-enter Venezuela even after he was put on a Delta flight out of the U.S. for Caracas, and that at least at an official level, there's been no further trace of him. And members of the Venezuelan interior officers, high-level officers, the Venezuelan Interior Ministry that I spoke with, and I spoke with, and I was in Venezuela, and in fact brought the case to my attention, believe that he was taken off the plane by the Venezuelan secret police at the time, called the DCP, and either just taken directly out of the airport on in one of their vehicles, or maybe passed through the VIP immigration lounge where it's possible to get people through without registering their entry in certain cases. So that's so yeah, I mean, these operate at a very high level. And frankly, I always have been of the opinion, I worked as a terrorism analyst for many years prior to becoming a journalist, or, with Risks International, a firm in Washington which specialized in terrorism, at the time when it became in analyzing terrorism for the private sector, for large business corporations and government agencies. And back in the 80s, and frankly, I'm of the school of thought that really very dangerous terrorist groups, those that operate at a very high level with a great degree of precision and a great degree of lethality, are almost invariably government connected, state sponsored in some way or other. And this is the category where al-Qaida and Hezbollah belong. We know that Hezbollah is managed by Iran, which has also, of course, been trying in a very serious way to gain presence and leverage in Latin America. And of course, they are a very close ally of the Maduro regime, of Chavez and of Maduro in Venezuela. And of course, the Hezbollah connection is a very key component of that.
That's incredible. Now Venezuela have a new deal with Russia. Why you think that Russia wants to manufacture Kalashnikov weapons in Venezuela? It's a new deal with the regime, Maduro regime now, and Russia want to manufacture a Kalashnikov in Venezuela. That's incredible. It's terrible.
Well, I think that this has been going on for some time. I think the deal for a AK factory, for a Kalashnikov factory in Venezuela, was signed by Chavez quite some time ago. It took a long time for it to get going, but I believe recently they actually have set up production. It's for the AK-103, which is the latest version of the AK, which is a modernized version of the AK-47, and possibly other type of assault weapons as well. Well, Russia is one of the main arms supplier to Venezuela. There is some Chinese weapons being deployed there as well, or being employed there by the Venezuelan armed forces. But Russia is the main arms supplier to Venezuela. They supply them with their much of their anti-aircraft systems, as well as their much of their naval, their small boat naval capability, command control, communications. All this is Russian. It's basically they're modeling the Venezuelan army after the Cuban army, after the Cuban armed forces, which are totally Russian supplied and trained, with some Chinese component as well. Although actually, it's interesting in the case of Venezuela. Now we have the Iranians coming in there as well, and apparently they are manning, as Venezuela shares the same type of anti-aircraft air defense system as Iran. You have, from what I understand, I have Iranians providing parts as well as personnel to operate Venezuela's air defense systems, their SS-300 anti-aircraft missiles, and so on.
It's incredible. Subvention, Venezuela subvention, Russia subvention Venezuela, and Chinese regime. That's true. It's incredible. What do you think about the Wagner group of Russia subvention? This group, international group for some regimes around the world, a Wagner group.
Yeah, they're the Wagner group. Yeah, they're obviously very involved in Venezuela. I know they were brought in there back when it seemed like it seemed as if there was going to be a coup against Maduro, like when Trump got serious about trying to do something in that area. And yeah, a group of Wagner came in. I think their exact mission wasn't clear, whether it was to maybe evacuate Russian personnel, whether it was to increase security around Maduro, whether it was to conduct maybe other types of operations. But yeah, that was the Wagner group came in, I believe, several flights of some of their people and equipment to shore up Russia's security assistance there. Interesting that the Wagner group is now is also increasingly involved in Africa.
Yeah, that's true.
And since the French or the EU has started to pull out of or diminish their presence in Mali and countries in the Sahel region, which are very threatened by Islamic takeover, there are now Russian mercenaries being contracted of the Wagner group, we assume of the Wagner group, to provide security for the governments which are threatened. I suppose they think that perhaps the Russians are more reliable about this kind of thing than the Americans are, after the disastrous US pullout from Afghanistan, in which the Europeans, they just followed along. They didn't have the capability or the will or the structure to continue on their own, even though they objected to Biden's the type of withdrawal that Biden ordered. President Biden ordered. So yes, it's very possible that the Wagner group may become. You'll see them becoming more and more active throughout the world, and I'm sure in Latin America as well.
It's possible in the future have a connection Wagner group with the al-Qaeda. You think so?
Well, it's possible. I mean, when you think that you've got certainly Hezbollah operating in Venezuela with semi-official backing, members of the, operatives of the group having actual positions in the government. And you have the Wagner group there providing high-level security for the government. One assumes that there's going to be some kind of transmission of information, some sort of cross-pollination, which is not. In fact, it's interesting that at the time of the 2021 attack, of the 9/11 attacks, following the 9/11 attacks. A very high-level Russian intelligence expert. I mean, a very high-level guy. I forget his name. I don't have his exact name right now, but he was a member of the science of the Institute of Science, a member of the Russian elite, very much so. Said that that Russia had some kind of prior indication that a major Islamic terrorist attack was being planned against the United States that would have economic consequences, to the point that just prior to the attack, in which, yeah, the initial economic impact was, although it was short-lived, was very, very, very strong. I mean, the dollar dropped with a 15-point drop in the U.S. stock market.
The stock market.
There was a massive sale of U.S. dollars in the Moscow Stock Exchange, and that there was some preparation in Russia for some kind of attack. He didn't specify that al-Qaida itself was the group that was identified, but they spoke about a group of people acting out of for religious reasons, or words to that effect. We're going to attack. We're planning a major attack in the U.S. involving aircraft.
It's incredible. Incredible. That's the world now, 2022. For conclusion, you have more information about the Al-Qaeda in Latin America security for contribute this channel web meeting. We have to finish in 7 minutes for conclusion.
Well, I don't have any more specific information, Christian. This latest thing about the Brazilian cell the Al-Qaeda cell in Brazil came to me as again, a continuation of something that the type of thing Al-Qaeda has been doing in the area for quite some time. I am glad to see, at least it's reassuring to know the State Department is still on the ball, which despite the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, and that some level of control and is being kept on this, some level of that they're on the watch for this kind of thing. But I would expect that what Al-Qaeda is doing in Brazil, they're probably doing in other countries. I expect they're probably they've got operatives setting up financial operations, and very likely in Paraguay, and possibly in Peru.
Peru. Yeah, Peru with.
There was some time ago. There was some indication of an Al-Qaeda, some sort of Al-Qaeda presence or attempt to set up some sort of cell in Peru.
Sendero Luminoso with some connection.
And I'd expect that in Venezuela, where where they have terrorists, which is a black, it's a black hole. I mean, nobody knows. It's very difficult now to know what exactly is going on there, and where anti-U.S. terrorist organizations have free reign.
Is it possible?
And where there is this very curious case of an Al-Qaeda, someone who appeared to have some connection to Al-Qaeda attacks in the U.S. was disappeared. They have some official support for him, some protection for this individual who was deported for his Al-Qaeda connections in the U.S. and subsequently appears to have come under the protection or cover of the Venezuelan intelligence services over 20 years ago.
The crime, the Al-Qaeda financial terrorism, narco traffic, corruption in Latin America is possible all. Thank you so much, Martin Arostegui, for this interview. Thank you guys of the channel. And 2022, next with Martin Arostegui, the Special International Security. Thank you, Martin Arostegui.
Thank you, Christian. Pleasure to be with you.
See you later. Bye.